It was a bright, sunny Saturday morning in Oakwood Hills. The birds were chirping, the grass was green, and the air smelled like summer. 12-year-old Timmy Jackson was super excited. Why? Because he was helping his dad with a big job, sealing their driveway. You know, that gooey black stuff that looks like melted chocolate but smells kind of funny. That's driveway sealant. It's what you put on the ground to stop cracks from popping up. Timmy thought it was the coolest thing ever. He got to mix it in a big bucket, stir it with a stick, and then paint it all over the driveway with a giant brush. He wanted their house to look awesome, like the best one on the block. Timmy's dad had shown him how to do it earlier that week. Just spread it nice and even, his dad said with a smile. It's like painting, but for the ground. Timmy loved painting. He wasn't great at drawing pictures, but this was easy. Plus, he got to wear his old sneakers and a ratty t-shirt, so it didn't matter if he got messy. The black goo splashed a little on his shoes and he laughed. "I'm a driveway artist," he said to himself, grinning big. He imagined their house looking so sharp that all the neighbors would say, "Wow, Timmy did that." The sun was shining down, making the black stuff glisten like wet paint. Timmy hummed a little song as he worked. He dipped the brush in the bucket, pulled it out dripping, and slapped it onto the driveway. Swipe, 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 he moved the brush back and forth, covering every spot. It was hard work, but fun too. His dad had run to the store to grab more sealant because they'd used up the first can fast. "Keep going, champ," his dad had called as he drove off. "I'll be back soon." So there Timmy was, all alone, making their driveway perfect. But not everyone thought it was perfect. Nope. Someone was watching Timmy and she didn't like what she saw. Across the street, in a big white house with fancy curtains, lived Mrs. Karen Baxter. Everyone called her the HOA Queen. HOA stands for Homeowners Association. It's like a club for grown-ups who make rules about how houses should look. Mrs. Baxter loved rules. She loved them so much that she'd walk around the neighborhood with a little notebook, writing down anything she didn't like. A lawn too tall, she'd write it down. A mailbox too bright, she'd write that down too. And then she'd knock on your door and tell you to fix it. Most people just rolled their eyes and said, "Okay, Mrs. Baxter," because it was easier than arguing. Timmy didn't know much about the HOA. He was just a kid. He didn't care about rules or fancy houses. He cared about video games, his bike, and now this driveway job. But Mrs. Baxter, she cared a lot. And right now she was standing at her window, staring at Timmy. Her arms were crossed and her eyes were squinting like she'd just eaten a sour lemon. She didn't like the black goo. She didn't like the smell. And she really didn't like that Timmy was doing it all by himself, making a little mess on the edge of the driveway. To her, it looked like trouble, big trouble. Timmy didn't see her at first. He was too busy swiping the brush and wiping sweat off his forehead. The sun was hot and his hands were sticky from the sealant. He stepped back to look at his work. "Not bad," he said out loud. "Dad's gonna be proud." He imagined his dad pulling into the driveway later, giving him a high five, maybe even letting him pick pizza for dinner as a reward. Pepperoni sounded so good right now. Timmy's stomach growled just thinking about it. But while Timmy was dreaming about pizza, Mrs. Baxter was getting madder by the second. She grabbed her phone off the table and held it tight. Her fingers tapped the screen fast, like she was sending a secret message. She muttered to herself, "This is ridiculous. That kid can't just do whatever he wants." She didn't care that Timmy was just helping his dad. She didn't care that the driveway looked better already. To her, it was wrong. It was against the rules, or at least the rules she made up in her head. And Mrs. Baxter, she loved being in charge. She loved telling people what to do. It made her feel big and important. Now here's the thing Timmy didn't know. Mrs. Baxter had a secret, a huge one. It wasn't just that she was grumpy or bossy. Nope, it was way bigger than that. While she stood there, glaring out her window, something else was happening, something snaky. Something that was going to turn this sunny Saturday into the wildest day Oakwood Hills had ever seen. What was it? Oh, I can't tell you yet. That ruined the fun. But let's just say Mrs. Baxter wasn't as smart as she thought she was. And Timmy, he was about to stumble into the middle of it, brush and all. Back outside, Timmy kept working. He didn't hear the curtains rustling across the street. He didn't see Mrs. Baxter's angry face pressed against the glass. He was in his own little world, painting the driveway, thinking about how cool it was to help his dad. The black goo was almost gone from the bucket, so he scraped the sides with his brush to get every last bit. "Gotta make it perfect," he said, nodding to himself. He wanted his dad to come home and say, "Timmy, you're the best." That's all he cared about right then. The neighborhood was quiet, except for the sound of Timmy's brush going swish, swish, swish. A squirrel ran across the yard and a dog barked a few houses down. It felt like a normal day. A good day. But normal days don't last forever, do they? Not when someone like Mrs. Baxter is around. She wasn't just watching anymore. She was planning. She was ready to start trouble, big trouble. And poor Timmy had no idea what was coming. Inside her house, Mrs. Baxter paced back and forth. Her flip-flops went slap, slap, slap on the floor. She looked at her phone again, then out the window, then back at her phone. "That's it," she said, her voice loud and sharp. "I'm not letting this go." She didn't like the black goo. She didn't like the smell wafting across the street. And she really didn't like that Timmy was doing it without asking her first. In her mind, she was the boss of everything, the queen of Oakwood Hills. And if she didn't like something, she was going to stop it, right now. Timmy wiped his hands on his shorts, leaving little black streaks. He didn't care, he'd wash them later. He stepped back again to check his work. The driveway was starting to look smooth and shiny, like a brand new road. He smiled big. "Almost done," he said. He could already hear his dad's truck rumbling back any minute. Maybe they'd finish together and then play catch in the yard. That sounded fun. Timmy loved Saturdays like this, working hard, hanging out, just him and his dad. But across the street, Mrs. Baxter had other plans. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't thinking about fun. She was thinking about rules and power and how she could make Timmy stop. She didn't know that her big secret was ticking like a clock, ready to go off. She didn't know that this day wasn't going to end the way she wanted. All she knew was that Timmy and his gooey brush were in her way, and she was going to do something about it. So there was Timmy, happy and busy, painting away. And there was Mrs. Baxter, mad and sneaky, watching from her window. Two people on the same street, but with totally different ideas about what this day would bring. Timmy thought it was about fixing a driveway. Mrs. Baxter thought it was about keeping control, but something else was coming, something neither of them expected. What was it? Well, you'll just have to keep reading to find out. The trouble, about to start, and it's going to be a wild ride. Timmy was right in the middle of painting the driveway when it happened. The sun was high, the black goo was shiny, and he was feeling pretty good about his work. But then, bam, the front door of the big white house across the street flew open. Out came Mrs. Karen Baxter, the HOA queen, moving fast. Her flip-flops went slap, slap, slap on the pavement as she marched toward him. Her face was red, her eyes were wide, and she looked mad, like really mad. Timmy stopped moving. His brush stayed in his hand, dripping sticky black goo onto his sneakers. He didn't know what was coming, but it didn't look good. "What are you doing, you little troublemaker?" Mrs. Baxter yelled. Her voice was loud and sharp, like a teacher scolding a kid for running in the hall. She pointed a long, bony finger right at Timmy's face. "That smelly stuff is against the rules. I'm calling 911. Timmy's eyes got big. 911, that's what you call when there's a fire or a robber, not for a kid painting a driveway." He froze, standing there with his brush, the goo making little plop, plop sounds as it hit the ground. His heart started beating fast. What had he done wrong? He was just helping his dad. Timmy's dad wasn't even there to help him out. He'd gone to the store to buy more sealant because they'd run out. "I'll be back quick, Timmy," his dad had said, waving from the truck. That left Timmy all alone, just him and the bucket of black goo. And now here was Mrs. Baxter, screaming like he'd set the whole neighborhood on fire. Her flip-flops kept slapping the ground as she got closer, and her voice got louder. "This is a disgrace," she shouted. "You can't just slap that junk all over the place." Timmy didn't know what to say. He looked down at the driveway. It wasn't junk, it was sealant. It made the ground look smooth and new, but Mrs. Baxter didn't see it that way. She saw a mess. She saw a kid breaking her rule. She stood there, hands on her hips, glaring at him like he was the worst kid in the world. "You think you can just do whatever you want," she snapped. "I run this street, me, not you, not your dad, me." Her voice was so loud that a bird in a nearby tree flew away, scared off by all the yelling. Timmy opened his mouth to talk. "It's just driveway stuff," he mumbled. His voice was quiet, shaky. He didn't want to fight. He just wanted to finish the job and eat pizza later with his dad. But Mrs. Baxter didn't care what he said. She didn't even listen. She shook her head, her lips pressed tight together, and pulled her phone out of her pocket. "Oh no you don't," she said, wagging her finger at him. "I'm not letting this go. This is vandalism, disorder. I'm calling the police right now." She started tapping the screen, her fingers moving fast, like she couldn't wait to get him in trouble. Timmy's stomach flipped. The police, for real. He looked at his brush, then at the driveway, then back at Mrs. Baxter. He didn't understand. Vandalism was when you spray-painted bad words on a wall or broke a window. He wasn't doing that. He was fixing something, making it better. But Mrs. Baxter was huffing and puffing, talking into her phone already. "Yes, hello 911, she said, her voice all dramatic. "I've got a kid out here ruining the neighborhood. You need to send someone fast." Timmy just stood there, his sneakers stuck to the ground, not sure what to do. He felt small, like a bug she wanted to squash. Mrs. Baxter kept going. She paced back and forth, her flip-flops slapping louder with every step. "He's got this awful black stuff everywhere," she told the person on the phone. "It stinks, it's ugly, and it's against the rules. I want him stopped." She shot Timmy a mean look, like he was a criminal caught stealing cookies. Timmy wanted to run inside and hide, but he didn't. He stayed put, holding his brush, wishing his dad would hurry back. Where was he? Why did the store have to be so far away? The air felt heavy now, not sunny and fun anymore. Mrs. Baxter's yelling made everything tense, like a storm was about to hit. Timmy's hands got sweaty and the brush felt slippery. He didn't know why she hated him so much. He'd seen her before, walking around with her little notebook, telling people to mow their lawns or paint their fences, but he'd never talked to her. He didn't think she'd even noticed him until today. And now she was calling the police on him, over driveway goo. It didn't make sense. Mrs. Baxter hung up the phone and crossed her arms. "They're on their way," she said, smirking a little. "You're in big trouble now, kid." She sounded so sure of herself, like she'd won a game. Timmy swallowed hard. He didn't feel like a winner. He felt scared and confused. He looked around, hoping a neighbor would come out and say, "Hey, leave him alone." But the street was quiet. No one was there to help. It was just him and Mrs. Baxter staring each other down. She kept talking, her voice sharp like a knife. "I've lived here for years," she said. "I keep this place perfect, and then you come along with that smelly mess. No way, not on my watch." She pointed at the driveway like it was the worst thing she'd ever seen. Timmy wanted to tell her it wasn't a mess, it was a job well done, but he didn't say anything. He was too nervous. His words got stuck in his throat, and all he could do was stand there, dripping goo onto his shoes. Mrs. Baxter didn't stop. She loved being loud, loved being in charge. "You kids think you can do anything," she said, shaking her head. "Well, not here. I make the rules. I say what's okay and what's not." She puffed out her chest, like she was the queen of the whole world, not just Oakwood Hills. Timmy wondered why she cared so much. It was just a driveway. It wasn't hurting anyone, but to her it was a big deal, a huge deal, and she wasn't going to let it go. Timmy's mind was spinning. He thought about his dad driving back with more sealant, not knowing any of this was happening. He thought about the police maybe showing up with sirens and lights, all because of some black goo. It felt like a bad dream. He didn't want to be in trouble. He didn't want his dad to be mad. He just wanted to finish and go inside and forget this ever happened. But Mrs. Baxter wasn't done. She kept glaring at him, her phone still in her hand, like she might call someone else just to make things worse. But here's the thing Mrs. Baxter didn't know. Timmy wasn't the only one being watched that day. Nope, someone else had their eye on her, someone sneaky, someone quiet, someone she didn't even notice. Who was it? Oh, you'll find out soon, I promise. It's a big surprise and it's going to change everything. Mrs. Baxter thought she was the boss, thought she had all the power, but she didn't see what was coming. She was too busy yelling at Timmy, too busy making a fuss, to realize the real trouble was headed her way. Timmy didn't know about that yet either. He was just a kid, stuck in the middle of her storm. He held his brush tighter, the goo still dripping, and waited. He didn't know what the police would say. He didn't know if he'd get in trouble or if his dad would be upset. All he knew was that Mrs. Baxter was mad and she wasn't going to stop. The tension was thick, like the air before rain. Something big was building, and it wasn't just about the driveway anymore. Hang on tight, this is just the start. Timmy stood there, his brush still in his hand, when the police cars rolled in. They came fast, two of them, their tires crunching on the quiet street. The lights on top weren't flashing, but Timmy's heart started pounding anyway. Thump, 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 it felt like it might jump right out of his chest. He looked at the black goo on the driveway, then at his messy sneakers, and thought, am I in trouble over this? He couldn't believe it. He was just a kid helping his dad, not some bad guy robbing a bank. But Mrs. Baxter had called 911 and now the cops were here. What was going to happen? Mrs. Baxter didn't look worried at all. She stood across the street, her arms crossed tight, a big smirk on her face. She looked like she'd just won a giant prize at the fair, like the biggest teddy bear ever. "See," she said, her voice loud and proud. "I told you I'd fix this." She shouted it so the whole block could hear, like she wanted everyone to know she was the boss. Her flip-flops were planted on the pavement, and her eyes were locked on Timmy. To her, he was the problem, and she'd called the police to prove it. She thought she had everything under control. The car doors opened, and two cops stepped out. One was tall with a shiny badge, and the other was shorter, holding a little notebook. Timmy expected them to march right over to him, maybe tell him to drop the brush and explain himself. But they didn't. Nope, they didn't rush to Timmy at all. Instead, they stood by their cars, looking around. Their faces weren't mad or serious, they looked confused. Timmy tilted his head. Why weren't they coming to him? What was going on? The tall cop glanced at the driveway. He saw the black goo all shiny and wet, spread out nice and even. Then he looked at Timmy, standing there with his brush, goo dripping onto his shoes. Finally, he turned to Mrs. Baxter. "Ma'am," he said, his voice calm but firm, "we're not here for a kid with a paintbrush." Timmy's mouth dropped open a little. Not here for him. Then why were they here? Mrs. Baxter's smirk disappeared fast, like someone had wiped it off with a rag. "What do you mean?" She snapped, her voice sharp and annoyed. She didn't like that answer, not one bit. The shorter cop stepped forward, tilting his head a little. He held up his notebook, flipping a page with his thumb. "We've got a bigger problem," he said, looking right at Mrs. Baxter. "And it's got your name on it." Timmy blinked. Wait, what? His name wasn't on anything. He was just Timmy, the kid with the driveway goo. But then he realized something. The cop wasn't talking about him. He was talking about her, Mrs. Baxter. Her face turned red, bright red, like a tomato ready to burst. She uncrossed her arms and put her hands on her hips. "That's ridiculous," she said, her voice loud again. "I called you. I'm the one fixing things here." Timmy's heart slowed down a little. Okay, so maybe he wasn't in trouble. But what did the cop mean? What problem? What was in that notebook? He looked at Mrs. Baxter, then at the cops, then back at her. She didn't back down, not yet. She stood tall, puffing out her chest like she was still the queen of the street. "You must be confused," she said, pointing at Timmy. "He's the one breaking the rules. Look at that mess." The tall cop raised an eyebrow. "Mess," he said. "Looks like a driveway to me." Timmy almost smiled. The cop didn't think it was a mess. Maybe this wasn't so bad after all. But Mrs. Baxter wasn't done. "No, no, no," she said, shaking her head fast. "That smelly stuff is against the HOA rules. I know, I make the rules." She sounded so sure, like she had all the power in the world. The shorter cop scribbled something in his notebook, not even looking up. He said, his voice flat. "We'll get to that." Timmy watched, his brush still dripping. Plop, plop, the goo hit the ground, but he didn't care anymore. Something weird was happening, and he wanted to know what. The tall cop walked a little closer to Mrs. Baxter. "Ma'am," he said, "we got a call, sure, but it wasn't just yours." Mrs. Baxter's eyes got wide. "What?" she said, her voice squeaky now. "What call?" The cop didn't answer right away. He looked at his partner, then back at her. "Let's just say we were already on our way," he said. Timmy's head spun. Already on their way, before she called 911. How? Why? He didn't get it, but he could tell Mrs. Baxter didn't either. Her red face started to look a little pale, like she wasn't so sure of herself anymore. The shorter cop flipped another page in his notebook. "Karen Baxter, right?" he asked, glancing up at her. She nodded, but slower this time. "Yes, that's me," she said, her voice not as loud now. "Good," the cop said, "because we've been hearing some things about you." Timmy's ears perked up, hearing things about Mrs. Baxter. What things? He looked at her, waiting for her to yell again, but she didn't. She just stood there, her flip-flops quiet for once. "What things?" she asked, her voice shaky. The cop smiled a tiny bit, not a happy smile, but a knowing one. "Oh, you'll see," he said. Timmy's mind was racing. This was getting wild. First, Mrs. Baxter called the police on him. Now the police were saying they were here for her. He didn't know what to think. He looked at the driveway, then at the cops, then at Mrs. Baxter again. She was starting to sweat, even though it wasn't that hot out anymore. Her hands fidgeted, like she didn't know what to do with them. "This is nonsense," she said, but it didn't sound strong. It sounded like she was trying to convince herself. The tall cop took another step. "We got a tip," he said, "a big one, and it's not about driveways." Timmy's eyes got big. A tip, like a secret someone told them. He loved secrets, well, fun ones, like where his dad hid the Christmas presents. But this didn't sound fun, it sounded serious. Mrs. Baxter laughed, but it was a weird, nervous laugh. "A tip about me? That's crazy," she said. The cop didn't laugh back. "Maybe," he said, "but we're here to check it out." Timmy couldn't believe it. Something big was about to happen. He could feel it. The air felt tight, like before a thunderstorm. Mrs. Baxter had been so loud, so bossy, but now she looked smaller. The cops weren't scared of her. They weren't even mad at Timmy. They were focused on her, and she didn't like it. "You're wasting your time," she said, her voice cracking. "That kid's the problem." She pointed at Timmy again, but the cops didn't even look at him. The shorter one just kept writing in his notebook, like he was making a list. Timmy's brush felt heavy now. He wanted to put it down, but he didn't move. He was too busy watching. What was the tip? Why were the cops here before Mrs. Baxter called? He didn't know, but he could tell it was important. Mrs. Baxter's smirk was gone and her hands were shaking a little. She kept talking, trying to sound tough. "I'm the HOA queen," she said. "I keep this place perfect. You should be thanking me." The tall cop shrugged. "We'll see about that," he said. Something was coming, something huge. Timmy didn't know what, but it wasn't just about the driveway goo anymore. Mrs. Baxter thought she'd won when the cops showed up, but now she was the one in the hot seat. The cops knew something she didn't, and it was making her nervous. Timmy could see it in her eyes. She wasn't the queen right now. She was just a lady in flip-flops trying to figure out what was going on. And Timmy, he was just a kid with a brush, stuck in the middle of it all. Hang on, this was about to get even crazier. The police car rolled up slow and quiet, stopping right in front of Karen's big fancy house. The tires crunched on the road and the red and blue lights flashed just a little. Two officers climbed out, one tall with a serious face, the other shorter with a notepad in his hand. Karen saw them and her eyes got huge, like she'd just won a prize. She threw her hands in the air and yelled, "Finally, you're here." She marched over to them, her flip-flops slapping the ground, her voice loud enough for the whole street to hear. "Arrest that kid, that Timmy boy. He's ruining everything with his stinky black goo on the driveway. Look at him, just look." But here's the funny thing, the officers didn't even turn their heads toward Timmy, not one peek. Instead, they both stared right at Karen. The tall one crossed his arms and said, real calm, "Ma'am, we're not here for the kid, we're here for you." His voice was deep, like a teacher who means business. Karen froze, her mouth fell open so wide you could have tossed a ball in there. "What?" she squeaked, her voice all high and shaky. She blinked fast, like she couldn't believe her ears. "Me, what are you talking about? That's crazy." She pointed at Timmy again, her finger wagging like a mad dog's tail. "He's the troublemaker, not me. I'm the good one here." But then something wild happened. Little Timmy Jackson, the quiet kid with the paintbrush, put down his bucket of black driveway seal. The goo dripped a little on the ground, making a tiny puddle. He wiped his hands on his old jeans, reached into his pocket, and pulled out a small notebook. It was beat up, with bent corners and a rubber band holding it shut. He snapped the band off, took a big breath, and walked right over to the officers. The neighbors, watching from their porches, leaned forward. What was he doing? Timmy stopped in front of the cops, looked up at them, and said loud and clear, "Officers, I've got proof. Karen's been stealing money from the HOA fund." His voice didn't shake one bit, it was strong, like he'd been waiting for this moment all day. He held up his notebook like it was a treasure map. "Check this out. I wrote down dates and times. I even got pictures I took with my drone. She's been sneaky, but I caught her." The crowd gasped. A lady across the street dropped her lemonade glass and it smashed on her steps. Another guy whispered, "No way." Kids on bikes stopped pedaling and stared. Timmy wasn't just some